Nihon hello, I am the Dark Fae, and welcome back to Confessions of a First-Time Dungeon Master. As always, if you missed the last session, I will put a link to it up here for you, so go check it out, and then come back and you'll see find out what happened after. So let's get into it. So this session, after my kind of little assault session, things seem to be kind of back to, I don't want to say like back to normal, but like, it seemed more normal to me for this session. Like some of the little gripes I had, didn't really seem to last in terms of like their attitude or their, like response to some of the NPCs, or, still had some kind of outlandish demands, but yeah, I think things don't necessarily carry over like session to session or week to week like the way it kind of does for me, maybe because I either film these or as a DM I like overthink maybe a lot, and but I am glad to see that like the little things that I notice aren't necessarily like the norm or like how my players are necessarily reacting. It just might be like in the moments, or that's that one day or the session. So I don't think it's as big of a deal as I had like initially maybe thought. So that's one good thing. So this session was interesting and kind of fun. It was like almost downtime because it was kind of like one day between them going to ask the Viscount for stuff, one day between that and like when they would leave. So they basically had the day to prep. Some of them didn't really have a whole lot. Like Umar just said he wanted to rest and maybe get his spells in order just in case. Valkyrie, she ended up going to kind of the library and reading up a bit on like this historian keeps history and kind of what the hags had told her. I was not prepared with that. I kind of just like made up some kind of little bit generic stuff on the spot, so I kind of want to flesh that out a little bit more. But basically, given the fact that like in the Age of Discord, a lot of different factions were at war, like Trin, who the god of the sun, and the Allfather, he like against Kror, god of undead, against Aremsia, goddess of death, Melispa, goddess of wild nature, etc. So the land of Ixaliad, which is like that center country, center country, it was like kind of overgrown and dominated by nature, and like the two forests were merged actually into one. So there was like a lot more nature. The swamps extended much farther north, and so kind of during those times, not times of peace, but basically the keep hadn't been constructed yet, so kind of during this age, like the armies of like men and elves and all that, they'd constructed the keep as kind of like a stronghold against Kror's forces and all the other evil stuff that's been going on. So they kind of constructed it, and then that kind of cleared away much of the vegetation. Like the forests were burned and the swamp was kind of flattened to make room for this keep, for this like stronghold. And then eventually kind of I think I kind of messed up on the history bit because I said, well, I mean, the keep must have been grand once, right? There must have been people in it, and then basically it fell and all the bodies were buried around it for like to make the ringed graveyard. And then after the war is settled, people kind of started coming back to it to kind of remake it into that symbol of like protection and like fortitude and stuff like that. So that's what Valkyrie did. She read up on. And so now here comes kind of the fun part. So the 5 of them spent the night at Ascalius, the Dragon's Roost, and now that they are in a place that is clean and dry and safe, they decide that they want to try and address Basil's ring. So Basil's ring is a ring of mind shielding, so it's like a ring with like a gross kind of slimy brain on it. and it is fused to his finger through means he does not know, and he occasionally hears a creepy lady's whispery voice telling him to do awful things. So they try and remove it. I think first step is Umric. He tries to like strike the ring. So basically this ring is whenever anyone tries to remove it or harm it somehow, they have to make a wisdom save that has a high DC. If they fail, they take 2d6 psychic damage, and that increases as the same person kind of tries again. So I've kind of marked who has tried before and like how and if they failed or not. So they have to take 2d6 psychic damage and also roll on the short-term madness table. So Umric tries, he fails his wisdom save, takes the damage, and then he is stunned for 1d10 minutes. So I rolled and he's stuck for 6 minutes. So they're like, oh shit. So they try a couple ways, I think, to wake him up. They like shake him, they slap him, they cure wounds, but nothing really gets rid of that. I think maybe a restoration spell might have done it, but they didn't try that. So he's frozen, and so now Tyrell tries. He tries to kind of strike the ring with the hilt of his sword. So same thing happens. He fails to save. He actually rolls like almost the same number. I think 81 versus an 84. And so he's also stunned. This time for 3 minutes, but still. So in this commotion, as they're like, now have these two not completely, but like two stunned team members who can only like speak falteringly and can't really move. They're like, oh shit, maybe we need to go see somebody, maybe we need to ask Fairnay for help. So as they're kind of like trying to wake them up, 6 minutes passes and Umric comes back to himself. He sees Tyrell kind of also similarly frozen, and then decides to try and cut off Basil's finger. So originally the way that I was going to rule this was that cutting off his finger is kind of like still trying to remove it. So like I was thinking maybe this energy would come out and like kind of prevent it. But then that was a bit like, because they're not attacking the ring, it's the finger that it's on. So I was like, maybe like it would be different. So basically what happened, he cuts off his finger and now he's got no finger. Basically what happens, the ring is on the finger, sure, but then what happens is the ring actually disappears and then reforms onto his middle finger. So he's still stuck with the ring. He doesn't know why. He's been trying to kind of communicate with the spirit, but it doesn't talk back. It seems to only really talk to him when she wants to. And I'm kind of excited to explore some possibilities with that. Maybe I'll introduce like a plot hook with it in the future, but I kind of don't expect them to be able to really deal with it until they're a bit higher level. So for now, I'm still kind of like just trying to like sprinkle in a little bit of like these occurrences to kind of keep interest and remind them like, hey, this is a thing that you might want to deal with. It also ties a little bit into Ivara's backstory, but they'll find that out. Okay, so what happens after that? Oh, so after they cut off his finger and the ring reappears, he's like, well, he and Basil and Ivara, they start running around trying to like find ways to reattach it or to get a prosthetic. So they go to Liddy first. So Liddy is still a little bit busy helping out with like the relief efforts. Shout out also to all like the real life doctors and nurses and healthcare workers who are currently dealing with our pandemic crisis. Like, really grateful for them. Thank you so much. So in the session, Liddy is kind of dealing with this. Still, they present to her Basil's severed finger, and she theoretically can maybe fix it. So regeneration is what regrows limbs, and that's a level 7 spell. So they don't have this kind of magic in the keep. I did rule that as like an apothecary, she might be able to make an elixir that could reattach it. It would take time. It would take maybe a potential quest for them to find the necessary ingredients. So not an immediate fix. They decide that they'd better leave her to her like current task of like helping these people, and instead she kind of directs them to Giraffes, the gnomish inventor, who can maybe provide a prosthetic. He's a tinkerer. He's able to kind of find a kind of a robotic finger and like fit it somehow onto his stump with like also kind of some straps that go to his wrist to keep it on. And then Basil also decides to like glue a Catoblepas tooth onto it, so it's got kind of like a claw on top. But anyways, so that actually took a little bit longer than I expected. And then with Ivar, because he's still toting around this Catoblepas skull, he eventually decides to not give the skull to Ferney, but only the teeth. So they take out like the tusks and the teeth, put it in a bag. I don't know what he's gonna do with the skull. He's like, could I maybe put it on a shield? I'm like, yes, but bones are more fragile than like wood or metal necessarily, so it doesn't really add anything other than aesthetic. So he didn't decide to do that. So they go visit Ferney's, give her the teeth, and then pretty much everyone except for Umric forgot that they had asked her for a house. So when she was like, well, we have some business to take care of, they're like, no, we don't want to deal with any more favors right now. And she basically is like, so do you want your house or not? And they're like, oh, we get a house. So, got them a house that I did some photoshopping to. I guess I'll put up an image of it. Here's like the first floor. So, originally this like room on the left was like a throne room of sorts, and there wasn't really enough rooms for everyone because at this time we had 6. So I kind of photoshopped it into like kind of a guest room space or like an extra bedroom space if anyone wanted to be on the first floor. So there's a dining room, kitchen, pantry, and then here's the second floor. So I did some photoshopping here to give them kind of like a common area, workshop area, study area, and then several rooms. So they all picked rooms, and then kind of looked around the space, signed the deed, etc. So that was fun. I've been waiting to give them that for a couple sessions, so I'm kind of glad that they liked it. So now they have kind of like a base of operations to go to, a place where I can send like mail or like quest pieces or quest like letters, kind of like that, quest flyers, etc. So after most of that, they now decide to, around evening time, they go to the Viscount's place. So they're provided with a double, as well as the diamonds that I mentioned before, like the 310 worth, 55 worth, and a 20 worth. So the 55 has to be Ivar's chromatic orb component if he wants to use the spell, and then the 160, 150 together are for Revivify, and then they've got 20 left over. And then, I think earlier Valkyrie and Umric, they did just kind of visit the castle guard to see how things were coming along, and also request like a few more sets of manacles and a grappling hook, which may or may not be useful. So at the Viscount's, they receive their items, and there's a mage from Alith Malar there who will potentially teleport them where they want to go, somewhere in the swamp. He's studied it before, visited a couple times, so he's like in between. I think it's very familiar and somewhat familiar, but I made the table myself basically to roll off of. So they decide to go to Flornissa because it's more well known, more prominent, which is smart. Basil's kind of like, you better do a good job or I'll tell the Umbra Lord that you didn't, at which point he kind of like recognizes, you. And it's like, because most of the mages of Elithmalar like aren't very pleased with Basil and kind of what he did in the past, since their job is to defend it. I think I maybe should have had some interaction with him and like seeing the Warforged, seeing Ivar, but I kind of forgot, so I didn't think of it at the time. So it just kind of didn't happen. But because it was only after that I thought, like, they actually would... Actually, no. Okay, I just thought of a justification for myself. I would say that the Umbra Lord, who is, like, Basil's mentor, keeper, teacher person, would have told them that the Warforged is in service to him for whatever he's doing. So, never mind. We're good. No retcon. Okay, so they are teleported to Flornissa. The mage doesn't stay and, like, immediately leaves back to the tower. And then they start to journey into the swamp. So this part, they might have stayed a night, I forget how they did the timeline, but they basically wanted to arrive at the place where the dancing lights showed up, like, by evening. So they kind of, I think they sat out in the morning and then started walking. Yeah. So I kind of fast-tracked a bit of the walking, since I believe in D&D, it's like if you've been there, like, you are able to kind of, like, find your way back without much trouble. So, and, like, given the fact that they had, like, kind of made a crude map, kind of been given landmarks by a guide, they kind of know their way around and to avoid, like, swamp hazards. So, journey down into the deep swamp into the swamp, find the dancing lights. I don't make them go through that again. Basically, now they know to kind of avoid the yellow lights, which are the will-o-wisps. And then they reach the talking tree, ring the bell, bring up the boat. They first send out Basil and Valhyrie to go negotiate, because they don't want to necessarily bring the Viscount kind of blindly into their lair, which is smart and correct. So they kind of try to do some negotiations. I think I did a little better with this part in negotiating, and the fact that the Marsh Keepers kind of have the upper hand. This is kind of their domain. There's not a lot of reason for them to comply with what they want. So the DCs are pretty high. Even with a 17, it was still, I was looking for 18. It was still kind of a failure on the persuasion part. So the whole party kind of ends up going with the Viscount on that enchanted boat ride to the lair of the Marsh Keepers. So now with this negotiation bit, I kind of fucked up a bit because I wasn't getting, like, my point across very well. Basically, they wanted the Marsh Keepers to inspect and remove Basil's ring first before they start talking. And so based out of that, like, the Marsh Keepers mentioned, like, they seem much more concerned with the ring versus like the Viscount and saving the city. And so to which they answered, like, yes, we are. We're here about the ring. So then I asked, like, then why even bring the Viscount? And, like, because of the ring. But what I meant was, like, why make a deal then for, like, with the Viscount, like, for the fate of the city, when they could have maybe traded, like, something else? Because now that I'm thinking about it, like, that's not really something they wanted. What they would want is to kill the Viscount, not to negotiate with him. So eventually, it didn't do a very good job with that, but eventually Tyrell, he asks, like, so, like, he drags Basil up and is like, so do something about the ring, or were you lying? And then, like, finally, to answer your question, yes, we were, because they are lying. And then at which point they drop their disguises, their, like, illusory appearances, and their hair kind of fades from its like their bright colors down to this like wiry gray and white kind of like long tresses. Their skin becomes like rough and gnarled and tinged green, and before them are 3 green hags: Swamp Mother Zerla, Auntie Immy, and Granny Seisha. So I don't think I did a very good job on the big reveal. I was having some trouble with Roll20 and like switching tokens around. But there it is, the hags. So, and basically, as soon as like, I believe it was Immy who says like, yes, you were lied to, she fires a level 4 lightning bolt in a line down that hits Basil and both the Viscount. So luckily they make their saves, so they only take, I think 15 points of damage. It would have been 31. 15 points of lightning damage. Everyone rolls initiative and boom, we start. So finally, we are at the big bad combat. Actually, while filming this, we've already played that. So you'll find out what happens in the next session. But yeah, so some parts were kind of meh here and there, but I think it's okay because it doesn't seem like these kind of feelings like linger from session to session for my players. So I feel like they shouldn't for me either. Most other than like the parts where I notice that like don't go very well and that I can improve on. But I think I need to be a little bit more lenient with my own DMing and just kind of do the best I can, because sometimes I forget too that I've been playing this game for the same amount of time as my players, minus the one who was our original DM who has been playing this for a lot longer. So I don't actually have that much experience, minus like doing my own like research or reading or watching shows, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna take it a little bit easier and just kind of do my best and try to make interesting things. So anyways, to find out what happens in the next big battle, I'll see you guys in the next one. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that for notifications of when I post new videos, which is every other day. Keeping consistent for once. So hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye!